We spend an enormous amount of energy obsessing over the breakdown of our physical bodies. We worry about aching joints and graying hair, yet we almost entirely take the endurance of our minds for granted. Because of this blind spot, we act as if we have an infinite runway. We put off our deepest goals, assuming our intellect will always be there, sharp and ready whenever we finally decide to use it. But when the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius sat down to write his private diary, the Meditations, he was staring down a fear far worse than the mere death of his body. He recognized that acknowledging the extreme fragility of the human mind is the absolute prerequisite for living a focused, intentional life. In the opening of Book 3, Aurelius points out a stark reality. Our cognitive powers, what he called the intellective faculty, can wither long before we actually stop breathing. He warns that the ability to apply reason, to accurately judge right from wrong, and to comprehend our actual place in the universe are often the first things to slip away in old age. Meanwhile, basic biological functions like respiration and digestion might hum along perfectly for years, while the mind itself slowly deteriorates. This chart highlights the gap he feared: a long biological lifespan on top and a highly unpredictable dropping line for cognitive lifespan below. Because we have no idea when that mental drop-off will occur, every lucid day is a ticking countdown. Despite this closing window, we regularly squander our sharpest cognitive years on meaningless distractions. The greatest human tragedy is not physical death, but the prospect of outliving our own capacity for rational thought. Knowing that our mental clarity is strictly limited, the question becomes how we stop bleeding this precious resource dry. Aurelius identifies an immediate, primary target for elimination: our endless fixation on the lives, opinions, and dramas of other people. He explicitly warns against malicious curiosity, everyday gossip, and the constant, toxic social comparison that pollutes the mind. When you allow yourself to obsess over what your neighbors are doing, your mind begins to wander aimlessly, completely abandoning its higher rational purpose. But giving your attention to external drama means you are literally stealing the last, best years of your own intellect. To prevent this, Aurelius proposes a strict diagnostic test. Imagine someone stops you suddenly and asks, "What are you thinking right now?" The goal of the Stoic is to be able to answer that question instantly, freely, and without a shred of embarrassment about where your mind was wandering. Passing this test requires cultivating a state of mind entirely washed clean of envy, suspicion, and social contentiousness. By stripping away all that external noise, Aurelius writes that a person becomes a priest of the gods, retreating into the serene, private temple of their own mind. This degree of mental discipline turns the mind into a fortified sanctuary, an intellect completely untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Once the mind is purified of external distractions, it gains the strength to confront that terrifying reality we started with, our own inevitable breakdown. The trained mind stops viewing aging and death as errors in the system, seeing them instead as natural, essential components of the universe. Aurelius observes this across nature, starting with a baker's oven. He notes how a rustic loaf of bread cracks and splits under the heat, creating a rugged, appetizing crust that wasn't part of the original design. He applies this same logic to the harvest, finding a distinct beauty in the way ripe figs and olives shrink and wrinkle just as they near putrefaction. He even sees it in the animal kingdom. The fierce, heavy brow of a wild beast isn't classically pretty, but it is entirely natural and therefore compelling. Recognizing the inherent beauty in nature's decay makes our own inevitable physical and cognitive decline feel like a part of that same orderly process. This ancient acceptance stands in stark contrast to how we operate today, trapped in a culture obsessed with maintaining eternal youth and endless productivity. Instead of building an inner temple, we allow our minds to be continually flooded with the toxic gossip and relentless noise of digital social feeds. But the clock is always ticking. We simply do not have the cognitive lifespan to spare on things that do not matter. We must ruthlessly filter out the trivial dramas of other people and turn our attention strictly inward. By protecting the purity of our own intellect, we strip the fear away from aging. We can finally watch the march of time not as a tragedy, but as a beautiful, natural process,
met with profound peace.